as we get started. Hope everybody's having a great day. We were talking about last time about the purpose and the rationale behind why we imprison people. What are we trying to accomplish with this process? And part of our understanding of this requires us having an understanding of where we came from and how the prison systems of how we have punished and imprisoned human beings has evolved across time, and some of the reasons why we do things the way that we do. So we left off last time talking about, the Code of Hammurabi and some Roman law and how they meted out punishment. Does anybody recall like some of the things that we talked about briefly on Monday in terms of how we punish people or how they punish people back in the day, way back in the day?
You said how
they used sorry.
Ladies first.
I'm so sorry. They used eye for an eye. Meaning, isn't that? You want me to go into deeper?
There was definitely some of that, but where were some of the specific punishments? So, like, if you committed a crime, what were some of the things that might happen to you?
They did branding.
Fantasia?
They did branding.
Good. Any others? Yeah, I can look at your notes if you need to. You should have those.
They did the gag.
I remember you said the horse and split them in half.
Good, right, good. So they would draw and quarter people. So they would do really barbaric things. Over time, what we're going to begin to talk about today in the text is how we began to think about the effectiveness of that. That if our goal is to deter people from committing crimes or protect the public, how are we accomplishing that goal by drawing and quartering people? So one of the things that we really want to think about, again, that is we're not saying that people shouldn't be punished if they commit a crime, but we want to think about how we're punishing them and what that says about us and what we allow for the people that commit our crimes. How we treat them says a lot about us. So the fact that, again, they were treating people in such barbaric ways kind of spoke to the barbarian levels of their society. We have tried hard to try and clean a lot of this up in our criminal justice system here today, but I'm going to show you something in a moment that kind of speaks to how we have a long way to go. And a lot of times, as we talked about before, Malik, that when people commit a crime, we oftentimes view them as being less than human and feel like they don't have certain rights, but that's not true. So we want to look very carefully, particularly as some of you all go into potentially working in the correction system, some of the challenges that we need to really begin to think about, because many of us, particularly many people that look like you and I, have people that are institutionalized in some of these systems. So we should be thankful about how they're being treated there. Let's look at a video real quick that kind of highlights why this is important. As always, take careful notes and more than anything, make sure that you see how this ties into the wider material that we're going to talk about in a moment. It's a very short news report.
And Tony DeCopel. Calls for prison reform are rising after a spike in violence in correctional facilities in Mississippi. Over the last 10 days, a total of 5 inmates were killed in different state prisons. And at a troubled site called Parchman Farm, 2 violent inmates managed to escape from there last week. Well, they have since been caught. Mark Streisman is outside of that facility. But Mark, this is really part of a national issue, right?
It is, Gail, very much so a national issue. America has the world's highest incarceration rate, but staffing at federal prisons has shrunk in recent years, and critics consider Mississippi's prison system to be among America's most troubled, underfunded, understaffed, and violent. Inmates here at the Parchman facility say it's not the guards who run the place, it's the gangs.
Inmates using contraband cell phones allegedly shot these images, although CBS News hasn't confirmed that independently. This is Parchman Farm, home to Mississippi's death row, and lately a killing field for warring prison gangs. 3 inmates were murdered here in 3 days.
My little brother stabbed, beat up, just in a cell, and then they putting them in cells with the rivalry. How could you do that?
At least one lawsuit alleges barbaric prison conditions, rats, open sewage, abusive guards, corruption. Yet since 2014, Mississippi has slashed funding and staffing. Gangs like the Vice Lords and Black Gangster Disciples have thrived inside. Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant.
We are going to stop it. We have it under control as best we can.
But Mississippi's prison staffing is in crisis. Almost half the roughly 1,300 corrections positions in 3 major facilities remain unfilled. Salary is one issue. Even with a degree, guards start around $26,000,
Pay attention to these kind of things, y'all.
roughly the national poverty level for a family of 4. 65% of the state's corrections officers are women.
Why are 65% of the guards women?
Because men don't want the jobs.
Jerry Mitchell is the dean of Mississippi's investigative reporters. He has looked into its prison problems for years.
Are the inmates, the gangs, really in charge inside?
They are in charge of where you sleep, where you eat, how much you get to eat. You have towers that are empty, that used to have guards that don't have guards now. And what do?
State officials admit the gangs are a problem, but they deny that the gangs are out of control. Mississippi state troopers have been working here in Parchman in recent days. Some of them told us the regular corrections officers stopped coming to work because it was too dangerous inside. Anthony?
No, that's quite a picture, Mark. And we understand that the prison also has corruption problems.
Corruption among guards, Anthony, has been a problem here for years, maybe not surprising, given how little these folks are paid. In return, the inmates get drugs, cigarettes, and cell phones, the cell phones that took the images in that story we just put on. But without those cell phones and those images, we might not have such a clear picture of what's happening inside.
Yeah, and it's not a pretty picture, Mark. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for indulging that. What are some of your thoughts on that before we get into the lecture? Do you have any thoughts on what you just saw?
I was pretty shocked when he said the men don't want to work there. It's 65% of women working there because men, I guess they find it dangerous, but at the same time, I don't know. That's crazy though.
Absolutely. It's and what it speaks to again, these are the kind of things that you really want to be thinking about. As you go into the criminal justice field, all levels of it can have its certain dangers and perils. But think long and hard about take some time to research, Malik, how this job that you say you want to do, how much does it cost? How much do you make? And what are some of the other the working conditions in which you have to endure? That salary that you spoke about, Nigeria, that's directly tied to the corruption, where if you're making $26,000 for doing such dangerous work, and one of the gang leaders comes up to you like, hey, we want to be able to get 2 pounds of weed, snuck in next week. How do you think those conversations may go? What incentive is it for the guards to kind of really maintain these spaces? And I was going to show you all a video. I still may do it before class ends, of a video of the actual beating in one of those prisons, and the guards just let it happen. There's not a lot of incentive for them to do that. And what we want, and then finally, one of the things I desperately need you to think about is the political dynamic. So funding, when they talk about funding, the people that decide that are the state's politicians, the governors, the congressmen, the senators. Oftentimes, there's not a lot of money put into these things because, again, they don't have to pay people that much money. They could pay people more if they wanted to. They don't want to pay people that much money. And in my view, a lot of that is related to the fact that the people that are housed in these facilities aren't really that important to invest in. And then we talked about, I think it was LaTasia that spoke about this last week, that one of the goals of prisons, it should be at least, or maybe it's Nigeria, it should be to reform and to rehabilitate. From what y'all just saw, and we just saw a small snippet of it, what do you think are the chances of people being rehabilitated and losing their criminal habits and behaviors in a facility like that? What do y'all think are the chances of that?
Low.
Very low.
Yeah, very low.
And one of the things that we want to ask ourselves, Shania, is, again, one of the main purpose of this class is understanding what the purpose of the correctional system. It's really easy. Politicians all the time come on TV just like everybody up. The same way we talked about before, right? Like with your parents and punishing you as children and teenagers. That it should be in the most effective parents, they take some time to explain why this happened. I didn't want to give you this whoop in Nigeria, but here's what I was trying to get you to understand in doing so. I didn't want to revoke your driving privileges, Latasia, but here's what I'm trying to accomplish in doing so. You're getting into some bad habits, and these bad habits are going to harm you later on. So perhaps by taking away something that's important to you, this will reform your behavior. So again, as opposed to some parents that become abusive where they're just punishing you because they're mad. That's not a good reason. So what we want to think about then, if they're locking all these people up, because you also heard in the video, and I hope you pay close attention to it, this lecture, like all lectures, is being recorded, will be posted if you missed anything. But take advantage of stuff like that will help you with the reading. But they said, right, that the prison population was going up. The prison population was going up. But the funding was going down. That's going to make it difficult to rehabilitate and reform. So if the goal doesn't seem to be, knowing all that information, it would be hard for me as a critical thinker to believe that the goal of we'll just keep it in Mississippi for now. It would be hard to imagine that the goal of locking people up in Mississippi is to reform them and rehabilitate them and make them into better citizens. In social sciences, I've asked you in various classes to formulate hypotheses. So if it's not to reform, what do y'all think might be the goal of the prison in Mississippi and maybe in other places? Again, from what I saw, and it's a limited amount of information, maybe there's some things we're missing. It does not seem like their goal is to reform and rehabilitate. From what you saw so far, what do you think their goal might be? No wrong answers, but what do you think?
Well, like someone said before, it's probably like the population control, because they're trying to keep people off the streets and stuff. So, yeah.
And I think that's a pretty reasonable guess that maybe, because again, right, the racial populations of most of these, prisons is very disparate. It's mainly Black and brown. Now, you might believe that that's because, Latasia, those are the people who could, most of the people who commit the crimes. As a social scientist, I know that that's not factually true. It's not. Do your own research, but it's not true. So a strong case could be made, Janiyah, that yes, the real goal is to institutionalize a lot of people like you that look like that, and perhaps do harm to their families for generations. Because again, you saw in the news, right, that when people get locked up, oftentimes, if you don't have a family member that's been locked up, you may think, okay, it's just that person. No, the whole family is affected by that. So again, right, there are some people, Janiyah, that need to be locked up, that just do bad things again and again and again and again. What we want to look at is, does everybody need to be subjected to prisons like that in Mississippi? So keep this in mind as we go forward. We left off talking about the Dark Ages, and there are over 300 methods of execution, and how the Enlightenment began to represent a break from this process, where people began to really think about, again, the most important question of the Enlightenment, Janiyah, is why? 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 Why is this happening? Why do we do this? As opposed to just say, well, hey, my preacher told me, the governor told me, the king told me, and this is why we do it. Because the reason why before this is because the king said so. That's why we do it. Why are we doing these human sacrifices? The king said so. Why are we burning these witches at the stake? Are we sure that they're witches? Hey, the king said so. Why are we enslaving people? Is this right? Hey, the king said it's all good. So now with the Enlightenment, Latasia, we're beginning to use our rational mind where now, as opposed to only leaning on the king for information, now everybody's a king. The person that's king is the person with the most knowledge and information, not just because you were born into the right family. And this revolutionary idea that challenged us to ask why in every social situation, This even crossed over into how we punish people. Well, we began to really think about like, okay, look, why are we punishing people? And what do we want to accomplish? Nigeria again, like Nigeria stayed out before longer than her curfew was mandated. I asked Nigeria to do some chores before I got home from work. She didn't do it. Nigeria been getting a little bit mouthy lately. We can't allow these kind of things to go on. Now, what might be the purpose of punishing her for not doing her chores? What if I'm her parent, what do you think I might be trying to accomplish with that? Because and I'll give y'all a hint. It's a little bit bigger than just those chores. What is a parent, if again, your parent asks you to complete a task, you didn't do it, you get punished. What are they trying to accomplish? No wrong answers. What are they trying to accomplish here?
Like lifelong goals, like in the, okay, if you don't do your chores and stuff, why should we give you a reward? Why should you be given something if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing? That teaches you life lessons.
Good. And what life lesson does that like kind of teach you? Anybody? There's a specific life lesson there. You're right that punishment in general, it is supposed to teach you some life lesson. What specific life lesson are you being taught when you are punished for not doing your chores? So in that case, it's really about your work ethic. That you're going to have to work and do jobs at times that you don't want to all throughout your life. So your parents are trying to develop a good work ethic in you. That's the purpose of the punishment. And that if you're deprived of something that's important to you, much like again in your career or when you go into the workforce, if you don't show up for work or you don't do the things that your supervisor is asking you to do, then you can be punished for that. And the worst punishment that you could possibly have is just being deprived of things that you need in your life. So, but again, right? So it might be something like, okay, we're going to take away a certain privilege. You can't play PlayStation for a week. But we're not going to say, okay, we're going to burn you with a hot iron because you violated your curfew. That might not necessarily accomplish your goal. So with classic criminology, for the first time, we began to try and use rational thought in terms of how we punish people. Punishment in this way. So again, I don't want you only reading and studying for the test. I don't want you only taking notes to try and memorize things that you think you may need for the test. I want you to have a true understanding. But one of the things that you definitely will be tested upon, according to classical criminology, what are they trying to accomplish with punishment? One, it should be proportional. It should also be useful, purposeful, and reasonable. We'll go into all of these in more detail in a moment. Proportional, useful, purposeful, and reasonable. What do you like now? Before I dig into it fully, what do you think that these things refer to?
Useful. You're talking about proportional, useful, and reasonable,
and purposeful.
And purposeful thinking, like the way of thinking. You should be thinking this way. Or help me out. Okay, help me, lead me to which.
And no worries, they're not easy, but definitely do follow through, and it would be a great idea to take notes as you go along. Mm-hmm. Proportional just speaks to your punishment should be in proportion with your crime.
Oh yes, we've been talking about that in my other class, like with stacking and other things like that. Where like you should, yeah. And
Absolutely.
about the Booker bill laws and how they're changing things and
Yes, a lot of attention is given to this in the criminal justice system presently. And yes, these ideas are something that you will hear in several criminal justice classes throughout your time as a scholar. So,
yes, sir.
So proportional that again, if you violate a curfew, do we make it well, okay, you can't go out next weekend? Or do we say, okay, I'm going to punch you in your face?
Yeah, so it should be fair.
Yes, proportional. Again, we want to be very clear with our words. Proportional. Fair is something different.
Yeah.
If you steal a loaf of bread, should you get 5 years in prison? Do we put somebody in prison? Do we give somebody the same punishment if they steal a loaf of bread as if they stole $20 million? Because again, under the Code of Hammurabi, in the Roman laws, they would just punish everybody the same. If you stole, everybody getting their hand cut off.
No matter what you stole.
Right. No matter what you stole, how much you stole, or what your reason was. We punishing everybody the same. So,
everyone said that they got kicked out.
Yes, nobody seems to be actually engaged in the class. Some they can try and join a link, but if they got other things to do, like they need to do them. But I'm trying to get some class participation, and only one person is talking.
Yes, sir.
But they're welcome to come back if they're ready for class. Otherwise, this information is here and available for you all when y'all got time. But if you're gonna do it on my time, like you actually need to be here, not just you got your computer on while you're doing other things. Like I don't even see how that's beneficial to you all. So that's kind of crazy to me. But so punishment should be proportional. That if somebody commits a murder, we should probably treat that differently than theft. It should be useful. Meaning, I'll put useful and purposeful. I'll blend these in this explanation. Meaning that it should be useful in terms of we either want to remove somebody from harming other people, that it helps restore justice for somebody else, that we're not just punishing you as a reflection of our anger or our disapproval with your behavior. There should be some purpose to this punishment that is beneficial or useful to everybody. The punishment is not just about you and your individual crimes. We'll come back to this in more detail. And then you talked about fairness before. That's kind of related to, that's actually more tied to being reasonable. Meaning that, again, like, just some level of fairness where, okay, look, if you are stealing to feed your child, that don't mean that you're going to get away with a crime. But the punishment should maybe be reasonable in terms of like how, so I'm going to give you a quick example, okay, Janai Owens? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
So it was this dude at this baseball game many years ago. His son was 7 years old. His son said that he wanted a lemonade, so he went to the stand to go get it. So he ordered, so he had not heard of what is called Mike's Hard Lemonade. He hadn't seen the commercials, none of that stuff. He just saw lemonade, okay, cool. Now, you may not be aware of this, Shania, but Mike's Lemonade is alcohol. Again, like he just went up there and asked for it. The person at the counter said, okay, this grown man is asking for a Mike's Hard Lemonade. I'm going to give it to him.
Oh.
He didn't ask like, hey, I want to get some lemonade for my child. Otherwise, the clerk like, hey, I don't think you want this lemonade, sir. Let me get you something else. He got the Mike's Hard Lemonade, brought it to his child. And one of the people working the game, they saw this little kid sipping on a Mike's Hard Lemonade.
Mm-hmm.
They immediately called Child Protective Services and called the police. They had the child take it from him. all types of other things like went about. So we could understand the potential for punishment, but it was an innocent mistake. Do you think that's a reasonable punishment?
I think that he didn't mean to, especially if he did not know honestly, and if the judge feels like he honestly did not know, then it should be reasonable. Where like what happened wasn't reasonable when they took his kid. That wasn't reasonable at all, because he's telling them that he did not know. And I mean, you know,
Right.
I'm pretty sure he did not know.
Right. And this is a dude with a professional background, had no issues in terms of children or abuse or anything like that previously. You know, again, nothing troubling in his background. Oh God, what else was I finna say? And then finally, like again, we talk about reasonable and being useful. Okay, we may want to punish this man. How useful and beneficial is it to the child to remove him from his father, to remove the father from the home? Like, what is that a solution? Again, if the father is a consistent threat, that's totally understand. And the rule is put in place tonight because there are times where people live in homes where their parents are a physical threat to them. And they be doing like, they knowingly do crazy stuff, like having them drink, smoke weed, all types of stuff. So the law is designed to punish parents like that. But with rationality means that we use our mind and we look at cause and effect and we look at the totality of events. So this is where judges are supposed to come in and they're supposed to look at individual cases. So it may be a situation like, okay, look, this is still irresponsible. If everybody who commits a crime be like, well, I didn't know, then obviously we couldn't really get much traction there in terms of eliminating crime. However, so they could have been like, okay, look, we're gonna punish you, but we're gonna give you a $50,000 fine and put you on 1 year probation. If in that 1 year there's any hint of you doing anything to put this child in harm, we taking it, shorty. But if you stay on, you don't give him no more Mike's Hard Lemonade, we'll just brush this off as an innocent mistake. You'll learn from it. You can actually be reformed, and the child doesn't have to be harmed. Keep this in mind. So like rationality means that we use our brains to figure out what are we really trying to do? Are we just trying to punish? Or are we trying to, again, if our goal is to make sure the children are safe and protected, let's really think long and hard about the best ways of doing that. Mm-hmm. Also related to punishment is that human beings were viewed as rational beings who seek to gain pleasure and avoid pain. So now, so in this way, right, the view through most of human history would be that people commit crimes because there's something wrong with them mentally. There's something in their genes. In some cases, that might be true. But for the most part, people commit crimes for the same reason that they do anything, to avoid pain and pleasure. So the whole premise of rational thought is that you do this. So I might see you doing something, Janiyah, that I think is crazy. But the notion of rationality is that most human beings have a good reason for doing the things that they do, even if it might not make sense to nobody but you. Now, a lot of times that ain't the case. People have not always given thought, but we try and work under the assumption that, hey, look, so I think that wearing skinny jeans is crazy. No, I think that wearing sagging looks really ridiculous. And I would encourage people to look into the history and how sagging became popularized. But if you have taken the time to get that information, Janiyah, and you still choose to sag, who am I to say? So there have been cities and states, mainly cities, that have actually tried to pass laws against sagging, which I don't agree with. I may not like it, but if you have given thought to why you want to live this way, I mean, for some of them, you might really want somebody to be coming to bump you up from behind, if that's what you're looking for. Who am I to judge that or say? So with that, right, we also believe since people commit crimes because they want to get something pleasurable and they want to avoid something painful, another way to do this is that another way to think about rational thought, Janiyah, is that people weigh the pros and cons in their decisions. People weigh the pros and cons in every decision. People weigh the pros and cons in every decision.
Like if they want to risk it or not.
Yeah, or risk definitely does. There's risk in almost any decision. But pros and cons speak to benefits and negatives.
Mhm.
That you're in this relationship that for everybody else, it may seem like really crazy. But you may see some benefits to being in this relationship. So the word on the street is that Melania Trump, the first lady, she did not sleep in the same room as her husband during the marriage. I mean, during the White House. What a shocking development. I'm not shocked again. Anybody that's seen together, see their body language could kind of sense that. But there probably was some so some people might say, well, that's stupid. Why don't she just get a divorce? But there are probably some benefits in her mind to staying in that situation. Some of them should be pretty obvious.
Yeah, for the money.
Right. The money, the power, the assets. She like, man, hey, I know how I was living beforehand, so I'm just gonna suck it up and listen to this, like, dude talk crazy. I'll probably give me a boyfriend on the side, on the slide, but no, I'm not leaving. So the enlightenment, so rational thought and classical criminology believe we can punish people like that. Janiyah don't care nothing about doing these chores, but Janiyah does care about something. As her parent can deprive her of the things that she cares about, so I can get her to reform her behavior. And her reforming her behavior is ultimately going to benefit her, it's going to benefit me, but it's going to benefit everybody. But so long as Janiyah continues to have benefits from not following rules, you know what Janiyah's going to keep doing?
Not follow the rules and
Exactly.
grow up and make big mistakes.
Yes. So ideally, we learn this very early on. Some people, like you said, they don't learn early on. They keep making big mistakes. And then the system has to teach them these things. And ideally, the system will teach them to rehabilitate themselves. But the system don't be loving us quite as much as your mom and your teachers do. So the punishments be a little bit different there. But rational thought, weighing pros and cons. I'm going to keep this up for a little bit, but look, don't just try and memorize these notes as you write them down. Make sure that you understand. And I think that you do. They're pretty easy to follow. And then I'll break it down in more detail in a moment. Again, so these are some of the premises of the classical school. The classical school is a theory of human behavior and how we can reform that behavior through very deliberate punishment. But this theory works off of these premises. Again, there are several premises here, and I'll go back through this if need be. I want to get to the thick of the lecture today before we go. So the first premise, right? So if we're going to punish people according to these classical school ideas, that is very different than like, look, if somebody does something deviant, we're just going to punish him as harshly as possible. So under this new way of trying to met out punishment, it worked under several assumptions about human beings. The first is human beings are rational decision makers who respond. Again, rational means that they weigh the pros and cons. That before you decide to do anything, Should I go to this party tonight? Should I take this class this semester or should I wait for summer school? Should I date this dude or should I holler at his friend? Should I take this job here in California or should I take this other one here in Mississippi? Should I get Chick-fil-A or should I get Subway? Any decision we make, it is believed that we weigh the pros and cons of our decisions. Okay, so I really like Chick-fil-A, but I only got so much money and I only got so much time. Those lines be really long. It also assumes that people have free will to make choices, meaning that, again, nobody forces you to do things, that you have choice to do this or that. You can go to Subway, go to Chick-fil-A. And bringing it to crime examples that as a little kid, you cannot have this toy, you want this toy. The toy will give you more pleasure. Your mother is telling you can't get it. You take it in anyway because having this toy acts in your self-interest. If you can find a way to get caught, if you can find a way to avoid getting caught, you're going to play with that toy and enjoy it. You're probably not going to feel bad or guilty at all. So punishment has to come in to let you know that the consequences for stealing that toy there are more cons to stealing that toy than positives. The negatives outweigh, the cons outweigh the pros. You may get an ass whooping. You may not be able to come to the store anymore. Your parents may decide to take all of the toys that they paid for from you for a period of time. This punishment has several purposes. Again, it's not just to express anger. Your parents are going to be very angry that you stole, no doubt about it. But the punishment, if the punishment is going to really change your behavior, Janiyah, it can't just be motivated by anger or by itself. It also has to be thinking about what is the most effective way for me to make sure that Janiyah does not do this again. Do you have any siblings, Janiyah?
I have one brother. He's older than me.
So even in this way, right? Parents, much like sometimes the criminal justice system, need to recognize that punishing everybody the same way may not be the most effective thing. Mm-hmm. That the way that they punish your brother to get him to act right might have been really effective. They might have to do something different for you.
Yeah, could they treat us because of how far of age a difference? He 13 years. We're completely different, and and they treat us completely different.
Absolutely.
Because I never got whoopings or anything like that. I kind of learned from him like what not to do. So I didn't have to do it to get in trouble. What my brother got in trouble for, I kind of just knew not to do it.
Excellent. And that's a great example. That is how classical school punishment is designed to work. That if we make punishment public and we see that, hey, everybody who commits this offense, this is what's going to happen to you. It causes other people to see the person that's been punished. They weigh the pros and cons in their head because they're rational and they got free will. So it's like, man, I just saw my brother do X, Y, Z. I saw what happened to him. I was actually thinking about doing that too. But now that I saw what happened to him, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want that to be me at all. We see that again, whether it's talking about, siblings, whether we're talking about somebody getting a death penalty, whether we see somebody we're driving fast on the highway and we see somebody get pulled over by the police. It's like, oh damn, I don't want that to be me. Let me slow down. Please don't pull me over. So the fear of punishment is supposed to reduce crime in this way. Because the aim of it, again, we talked about the purpose. The goal is not just to punish you. The goal of punishment should be to protect society. So in this way, we want to show other people that if you do this, you'll be punished this way. And hopefully we get a few less people that's doing that. Again, like, so when we talk about police brutality and stuff like that, like, I meant to pull it. I may bring this up for y'all next week. But in Colorado, for example, Janaya, they're trying to like pass legislation where now individual police officers can be punished if they commit some malfeasance in their line of work. Because you know what happens, like the most fucked up thing about, you know, the murders of people like George Floyd and Tamir Rice and Eric Gardner, is that nothing, like almost never happens to the police officers. Almost never. Not even arrest, not a fine.
So
they might get suspended with pay for a little bit, but very rarely are they prosecuted. Very quickly, they have something called qualified immunity where the police department can be sued, but the police officers cannot. So in this way, so Breonna Taylor's family, for example, right in Kentucky, they were able, her family got a large amount of settlement from the state of Kentucky. And that ain't like that's just going like out of like money coming out of nowhere. The taxpayers of Kentucky had to pay Breonna Taylor's family money because of some irresponsible shit that the police did. The police officers, though, nothing happened to them. So Colorado is trying to pass a law to change that. Because if you're a police officer and you know you can be punished for your behavior, that might potentially make you a little bit more cautious. But one of the things that you see, like, they like, because police, you know, have been doing these kind of things for quite some time. And I know you got a question or comment. I got you 1 second. I'm almost done.
you answered it.
Okay, for sure.
Okay.
Because the problem with this is that we know they've been doing this for a while, but now it's getting on camera. And it be times where they be doing stuff on camera where they know people is looking and they still do it anyway. Because they know ain't nobody gonna do a damn thing about it. That it's, again, they have nothing to fear. The pros of killing this person on camera outweigh any potential cons. There ain't gonna be no cons. So the classical school, again, works from the idea that people act to increase their pleasure and to reduce their pain. I didn't only go to school because I like education so much. I know that I ain't cut out for prison. So I wanted to avoid that situation by all means. Punishment should be painful enough, and please make sure that, like the last 2 slides that we're looking at, do not just try and memorize those. Please go back and read the material. But these 2 slides are probably going to be the most important things we talk about in the first half of the course. These 2 slides, but it's important that you understand. Don't just try and memorize. You're going to be asked to display your understanding many times. So if there's anything that you need me to go over, repeat, don't hesitate to let me know. But you will be responsible for providing this information that your other classmates were not able to get so far. Again, like that's why, like I said, it's really important to stay engaged. Like you're not doing anything again if this computer is on in this background noise. The material, the material will be here when you got time. You don't have to waste your time like that. So the punishment should be painful enough to deter criminals from further offenses and to prevent others from following a negative example. Again, like, so one of the things, right, where there are some parents and some families, Janaya, where kids be acting up and it's like, all right, Janaya, you do this one more time. Like, I'm gonna take your allowance. I'm gonna take away your PlayStation. I'm gonna really whoop you up good. And they never do anything. That doesn't really work effectively to deter the behavior. Again, with the punishment for a police officer is that, okay, you might, we might not allow you to go on the street. You might have to do desk work for a couple of years. That's not a painful enough, again, like we're talking about murder. That's not a painful enough punishment to really deter that offense. Additionally, the punishment should fit the crime. Like I said, we should not beat the skin off of your child because they didn't eat their vegetables. I think that's probably a little bit too strict.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want you drawing quarter or pour boiling hot water on a person because they said something about the king that he didn't like. So again, there should be a certain level of punishment for murder. There should be a certain level of punishment for rape. There should be a certain level of punishment if you burglarize. There should be a certain level of punishment if you commit petty theft. Because the danger, like I said, all of this is designed, Janiyah, to protect society. So if you're too lenient with your punishment, if you are too lenient in punishing police officers when they murder people, then that harms all of society. When you just let people get away from crimes and you give the presentation that people can just commit this crime with no fear of repercussions whatsoever. It's also important for us to truly have a effective criminal justice system according to the classical school. We're going to see some other theories later. It's important that equal justice be available to everyone. And this speaks to, again, that whether you're rich, you're poor, you're a woman or you're a man, you're black or you're white, justice should be applied equally. Again, these are the ideas. I'll talk about how they got introduced to America in a little bit and probably spiraling into Monday. And a really important point, right? Because again, people will be like, there's been more bloodshed. So there's one thing that has influenced and motivated more bloodshed in the history of humanity, Janiyah, than anything else. What is it? This ain't nothing that you've been tested on. You may not know. Don't worry if you don't know. But what do you think it is that has caused more bloodshed than anything else in the history of humanity? What do you think?
Probably land over land.
That's a really good guess. That's That's probably number two. That's probably number two. That's probably number two. And land, and then land related to money. But the first thing is religion.
Religion.
And particularly during the Roman times, right? People got killed all the time if you didn't believe in the right God. So there were things like the Spanish Inquisition, where if you didn't believe in the same white Jesus that the Pope did, you would be killed. If you didn't believe that the sun rotates around the earth, you could be killed. If you didn't believe that men were naturally superior to women, you could be killed. If you didn't believe that people were naturally supposed to be slaves, you could be killed. So in this way, right, the law should be applied to what you do. You can believe all types of ridiculous things in your head. So, like with white supremacy and white nationalists, it is not against the law for you to hate Black people. It ain't against the law for you to hate gay people. It's not against the law for you to believe women are inferior. You can have all those ideas in your head. But if you assault somebody because they're gay, if you treat somebody in an inferior way because they're a woman, those are different things, and the law can apply to that. Your behavior, not who you are, what you believe. Keep this in mind because there have been many times in history where people have been punished based upon beliefs, not what they've actually done, and particularly if what they have done actually causes harm to society. An important concept in the social sciences, Ms. Owens, is the idea of positivism. This is important to the Enlightenment. Before the Enlightenment, people had ideas that the world is flat because the king said the world is flat. The sun rotates around the earth because the king said so. With positivism, now, again, through enlightened information that allows us to ask why, now we can prove ideas scientifically, logically, or mathematically. So in this way, the king is not the only, or the leader is not the only source of authority and information. You can become an expert and use science to present information that you and I can both look at and draw certain conclusions. I'll let you get this down and then I'll explain this a little bit more deeply in a moment, but it's a very important aspect. So when we talk about positivism, right, very quick, I'm sorry. They gave you numbers to kind of give you a picture of how the Mississippi prison system is operating. They told you the numbers of how much they pay people. Those numbers are going to allow you to make certain conclusions about the relationship between how much people are paid and the conditions in that prison. Keep that in mind, and we'll talk about this some more in a moment. Do you have any questions so far?
No, sir.
I didn't hear you.
No, sir. Can you hear me? No, sir.
Okay, fantastic. So during the Enlightenment, it is no longer acceptable for you to be like, the world is flat. Men are definitely superior than women as engineers. The sun definitely rotates around the earth. It's no longer enough for people to just make these claims and they just float out into the universe and people repeat them. Now, our conclusions about the natural world, we got to prove them scientifically, logically, or mathematically. Where again, it is one thing for me to say that the Mississippi prisons are totally safe. Let's actually look at them and look at all the data that informs how they're operated. And you and I can make that conclusion. We don't have to just take the opinion of the warden or something like that. It's not enough for me to just say that, you know, we've been effective at educating people here at Allen University. We got to be able to show that through what y'all do once y'all leave here. And we collect all types of data related to that. So in this way, one of the things I want you to think about, and we talked about this a little bit in sociology, that in science, we really look at measurements. So we use a lot of numbers. So in this way, right, if we see that using numbers, if we're to make the conclusion that our system of incarceration is working, that it's effective, how might we see that expressed numerically? If we believe, if I'm going to say that, hey, my prison system that Dr. Muhammad run in South Carolina has been really effective, how could I make that case numerically? It's one thing for me to tell you it's effective. What numbers could I show you where you could see that it's effective too?
The number of people to come back, like to cycle back into the prison, if that number is low.
Excellent, Janiyah. 2 extra credit points on that one. That's what's up. You're right. If I'm making a case that my prison system, that locking all these people up is working, I should be able to show some numbers like, hey, our crime rate is down 3%. Our recidivism rate, the number that you just spoke to, is down 15%.
Mm-hmm.
I can use numbers to show what I'm doing is working. Don't just take my word for it. And if we see that the numbers ain't like that, Janiyah, we might need to ask some other questions. And I'm going to tell you that in the late 20th and 21st century, the prison population is just going up and up and up and up. And we should begin to ask ourselves, like, okay, is what we're doing really effective? But as you had spoke about in the beginning, maybe what we're doing maybe what's attempted to be done is working exactly like it's intended. Maybe. So in this way, right now, the period that we're talking about now, I'm going to talk about the prison population explosion in the late 20th century. But listen to me, Janiyah.
Yes, sir.
We're going to talk about the war on drugs. We're going to talk about 3 strikes law and all that have been really harmful to Black people. But it's really important to understand that it is really important that you understand all of this, okay? To understand how we try to, what we were trying to accomplish when we first started prisons. Because it wasn't like this all the time. The times that we're talking about now, right, we're getting into the late 1900s, I'm sorry, the late 1800s, so like the year 1890, 1900, 1910, 1920, 1930, that time period. So as we get into the earlier 20th century, 1910, 1920, 1930, they begin to see that there was more crime occurring. The people that, the academics and scholars that lived during these times. It's like, look, it's a lot of crime in New York and Philadelphia and Chicago and Cleveland. But you know what? We don't believe that this is the only way that we can behave. That human beings are just natural born criminals and there's nothing that can be done. They didn't believe that. Damn, it's just a lot of crime and okay, you just got to deal with it and you got to hope that it ain't you. It's like, no. We believe that we can find the root of crime and we can actually bring that down. And we can show through numbers how it's brought down. You don't have to take my word that the ideas that I have as Dr. Muhammad to lower our prison rate. We can find a way to measure that where you can see for yourself whether or not my claims are true. As I said before, right, during Roman times, the Code of Hammurabi, they would kill and do really harmful things to criminals because it was believed that they were evil. They were possessed by the devil or something like that. As we move into, like, again, the earlier 20th century, people didn't believe that. Like, the people that lived during those times didn't believe that. They believed that, no, actually, these people that become criminals, they're criminals because they're products of their environment. And a lot of times, right, so these are like Irish people, Italian people, Polish people, immigrants, new immigrants to American society, and people are trying to say that, they're rapists, they're killers. So the type of things that you hear Donald Trump saying about Mexicans now, and I'm not sure how much you followed the political conversation in recent years, but those type of things used to be said about immigrants coming from Europe in the early 20th century. And it was believed that there was something that was just naturally inherent in terms of their criminal behavior. It's like, no. A lot of times these people are living in really impoverished communities where people are really clawing to survive. And in these environments, people are gonna do some, what they gotta do to get over. But if we can change the environment that these Irish, Italian, and Polish people are growing up in, if we can change the environment, that would help us eliminate the crime or reduce the crime. What do you think about this? What do you think about that concept, Janiyah Owens?
I don't know. Okay, ask me again. Ask me again.
So don't worry about it. It wasn't that important of a question. But in the early, so the early forms of U.S. punishment was used to address that matter. So this is where they formed like the Walnut Street Jail, one of our first jails in American society. And this is where you first began to form penitentiaries. The purpose of penitentiaries was, again, that you would repent. You did something wrong. It happens. We want to bring you into this penitentiary. We're going to give you pastoral counseling. We're going to give you some religious counseling. We're going to really discipline you to help cultivate new and different habits in you. We're going to ask you to repent, to admit before God that what you did is wrong and that you know better now. And by being in this penitentiary, away from society, outside of your environment, the environment that was causing you to have all this bad behavior, you will be able to return after a brief amount of time, because we understand we're not going to lock you up in this penitentiary for the rest of your life. But when you return to society, you'll be a reformed citizen. A good, honorable white man ready to contribute. As these are most of the people that were being in prison these days. The first, again, so the Pennsylvania system was one of the first major prison systems in America. And many of the prisons since then followed after their model. This is where you had the Western Penitentiary and the Eastern State Penitentiary. I think this is a photo of the Western State Penitentiary. Again, one of the earlier prisons in the history of America. Actually looks nicer than some cells today. You got a chair in there, nice little bookshelf, little lamp. A lot more space than a typical cell. Got a little lounging chair over there. That's just off the chain. We'll begin next week talking in more detail about the Auburn system. Where again, these prison systems were in Pennsylvania. The Auburn system is in New York. And again, in going through all this, it's always important for us to keep in mind the purpose of punishment. What are we trying to do and accomplish here? And again, during the classical era, they had a very different goal and purpose than we'll see in other eras. We'll begin with this on Monday. As always, make sure that you stay up to speed with the reading. The lectures won't make as much sense if you're not reading. Are there any questions before we go for today?
No, sir.